The UFC has a new heavyweight champion, and his name is Francis Ngannou. This week is Showtime for Bellator. Welcome to Cage Minds MMA show. Hi everybody. Start off with some highlights right now. Get to our Fight Pass Friday before we talk about the UFC and Bellator coming up this weekend. We start off with tying FC 68 and the crowning of a new flyweight champion. It's Victor Diaz getting Wasar Cruz to the ground early, taking the back and the rear naked choke to claim the title. Preceding that event, we had LFA 103, the promotion's third event in a row from Shawnee, Oklahoma. Some great finishes. We'll start off by talking about the ground and pound. It was Abdul Karim Al-Swani versus Jake Sebastian. It was Al-Swani punching his way in, getting the single leg, disrupting the balance, starting off with some heavy punches from guard before being able to advance, and then it was Sebastian having to play the decision game. Am I giving my back or am I letting this guy hit me for mount? And in all, it's a big ground and pound finish for Al-Swani. A huge debut and long awaited. We move on up to the co-main event. Vanessa Demopolis, Cynthia Arseo, and it's a quick finish here as Vanessa Demopolis comes out on fire. A left hook stuns Arseo early, still following up with the punches, and it's a right hand landing to the chin. There's a knee that was borderline, but in all, it was one-way traffic for that 37 seconds and a huge TKO win for Demopolis. The main event, another extraordinarily action-packed fight. Spike Carlisle, Batsambrel, Davidorj, and it was Batsambrel applying big pressure early, working some body shots. Carlisle is able to turn the tide, pushing Batsambrel back, then explodes into a double leg, traps the legs a la Khabib Nurmagomedov style, and is able to work his way up the back and get the rear naked choke finish. Welcome back to the LFA, Spike Carlisle. That was Friday. Saturday, everything that we are anticipating for, everything we are watching for, UFC 260, and of course, we have to start off with the main event. Francis Ngannou, Stipe Miocic. How would the rematch go? We all know by now, I even told you guys earlier, we have a new champion, but it's how Ngannou did it that was just crazy impressive. A composed Ngannou who came out leg kicking, who came out looking to be composed, not rushing and not forcing the action. And an Ngannou who was able to stuff a Miocic takedown, and that's when we knew it was all going downhill for the champion, as Ngannou is able to sprawl out, spin around, take the back, push Miocic up against the fence, and land some nice shots against the cage. That's a bad first round for the champion. The second round, you see the big power jab from Ngannou, knocking down Miocic. Such a tough fighter. Miocic makes his way back to his feet, even lands a right hand that it looks like it may have stunned Ngannou, and that ends up being the fatal execution or lack of execution from Miocic, thinking he could take advantage of that right hand, and it leads to a left hand right to the chin, and our new heavyweight champion, Francis Ngannou. Go listen to Micah Frankel's Cage Mind, available on Anchor FM. I'm going to tell you guys why Ngannou is the biggest sensation that the UFC has had as a heavyweight champion since Brock Lesnar, why he's already the sixth greatest heavyweight in MMA history, and why I can make a case for him being the greatest athlete of all time already. Yeah, go listen to the podcast for that, because right now we can continue talking about the results and continue to talk about UFC 260, that co-main event. Tyrone Woodley, Vicente Luque, top 10 welterweights, and it's Woodley pressing the action, swinging hard early, and then looking to utilize his grappling, trying to take the fight to the ground. We haven't seen Woodley do that basically since his Strikeforce days. Really looked to emphasize using his ground and pound. They're pummeling, they're jockeying for position. You see the big looping punches of Woodley coming out. He's not gun shy this time. Those are all really good sights to see. They're really good. And Woodley's landing, and he hurts Luque, and then he gets overzealous, and that's when the short, straight punches of Luque start to land, and you start to see the chicken dance happen from Tyrone Woodley. Things are going downhill quickly from the clinch. You see Luque pull Woodley to the ground, lock up a Darish choke. It's now 9 of 10 wins for Vicente Luque, who takes Tyrone Woodley's number 7, and the former champion has now lost 4 in a row. Likely, this could be the last time we see him in the octagon. Francis Ngannou wasn't the only prospect or potential star that the UFC had on display at UFC 260. Next fight we'll talk about was the feature fight on the pay-per-view. Sugar Sean O'Malley, Thomas Almeida. And it started out with the left high kick from Sean O'Malley. How did Thomas Almeida eat that one clean off the front of his head? O'Malley goes on the attack, lands a left hand, walks off, looks for that walk-off knockout, but the ref disagrees. We don't get the stoppage, but you do get to see more of just the crazy, diverse striking possessed by the multi-hair colored Sean O'Malley. The high kick, the wheel kick, he's spinning, he's teeping. The third round, he finds a left cross that lands clean, and you have Thomas Almeida out for all intensive purposes, but the ref's not calling it. Calm, composed killer. O'Malley walks up and goes all Dan Henderson with a diving in, flying right hand for the knockout. Sean O'Malley back where the UFC hoped he would be. Also on that pay-per-view card, we saw Miranda Maverick versus Jillian Robertson, who came in as the number 15 ranked flyweight, and it was the former Invicta Phoenix Rising Series champion winner Miranda Maverick landing the harder strikes and getting the takedowns in the first round. Robertson, the veteran, rebounds in the second and is able to spend a lot of the time of that round on Maverick's back and in dominant grappling positions, where a third round where Maverick was able to out-scramble, outwork, have the deeper gas tank, and obviously take that round on the scorecards. We should see Miranda Maverick climbing up into the 125-pound rankings there in the UFC. And the card ended with fireworks, and that main card started with fireworks. Jamie Malarkey versus Kamo Worthy, and it was Malarkey twice landing his left hook to the Worthy chin. The second time, Worthy goes face down. Malarkey flies in. A couple follow-up shots equals the finish. The prelims, they ended with a bang also. Alonzo Menefield, short notice opponent, former LFA champions meeting here. It was Fabio Charant jumping in there on the short notice, and it was Alonzo Menefield putting Charant on the fence right away. Charant likes his submission game, and Menefield was able to bait him into going for the guillotine, picks up the legs, sweet double leg, clears the hips, immediately into side control, traps the arm, and you can call it the Von Flu. It's probably more appropriately the Von Prue. You know what I'm talking about, the Von Flu choke. A quick submission win. Menefield, only the fourth athlete to pull off that submission in the UFC's octagon. And the card totally started. Those prelims got started with a very interesting contest. Marc-Andre Bertel, some say MAB, taking Abu Azatar. Azatar came out early, applying pressure, looking to unload, trying to make this a short fight, where MAB fought back, absorbed the pressure, and then changed the tides, started to unload, working the body to the point where MAB takes the fight to the ground in the third round, and we got about 100-4 in the strike count in that third round before fully unloading from back mount and getting the TKO victory. UFC 260 was a lot of fun, and it leaves me with a couple questions. We're going to say, what's next for Francis Ngannou? Most people would say that the biggest fight to make, because the UFC is in to making the most lucrative fight possible, the biggest fight possible, that automatically would be Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. I believe there are some hurdles to clear to make that fight. I believe there's a lot of contract negotiation. And if you're already paying attention to social media, Jon Jones is not really inclined to just take any offer that the UFC is giving him. So I'm telling you right now, most likely, Francis Ngannou's first title defense will be a rematch against Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis is the next obvious contender. He is easily agreeable with the UFC and likes to stay active. I think that Ngannou Lewis for the UFC title is the next heavyweight title fight we see. You look back at Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque with a big win in the co-main events. And if you're able to look at the UFC welterweight rankings, it's not just as simple as saying what's next for Luque. Because what's next for Luque kind of gets dictated by what's next for Colby Covington. Colby could be in line to fight Gilbert Burns. That would make a lot of sense. That would open up Leon Edwards. Do you fight Wonderboy? Do you fight Michael Chiesa? Or do you fight Vicente Luque, who should be taking Woodley's number 7? Michael Chiesa probably doesn't want to have to hear this, but Vicente Luque or Stephen Thompson is probably the logical option for him, where Stephen Thompson has already beat Luque. Thompson's probably hoping that he gets a crack at Leon Edwards. There's a lot that could play out depending on if Edwards fights Covington, but I think a Chiesa versus Luque fight could be a possibility, or for Luque, a rematch with Belal Muhammad, depending on if Muhammad's eye clears up quick enough and he can get a rematch with Leon Edwards, or if that fight is null and void because Edwards is able to be active and Muhammad would still be hampered by the eye injury. You could see Muhammad getting moved up for an opportunity at a top 10 fighter like Luque. It would be a rematch. Luque wouldn't have a problem with that because he'd be able to stay active. So, Belal Muhammad, Michael Chiesa, those I think are the realistic options for Vicente Luque. And the other guy to pay attention to, we saw Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley there at bantamweight. The bantamweight division has been on fire, and there's a handful of options I think that are realistic for Sean O'Malley. Well, I got 4 of them, and one popped out of the blue because it's a guy who actually said he wants to fight O'Malley. First off, I would think that Chris Gutierrez would be a good option. He's a striker, he's light on his feet, but he possesses the danger having a great kicking game. I think that'd be a dynamic matchup. Davey Grant has won 3 in a row, has heavy hands. That would also be a fun striking matchup. Those don't, hit the spot for you, not your cup of tea. What about Hani Yaya, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ace? That would present a different kind of danger than what we've seen O'Malley have to deal with. A guy that is a just sniper, but with submissions, be a different kind of challenge. Still not the one. What about Ronnie Barcelos? Barcelos, 15-1, 5-0 in the UFC, heavy-handed, good wrestling submission game. That is a realistic threat. Those are all the kind of prospects or guys that I think are at the same level that I like to see O'Malley fight, but those all go out the window when Dominic Cruz says he'd like to fight O'Malley. And that's most likely the fight to make, because that's the fight. If you're O'Malley and you hear that call out, you're pushing for it. If Cruz is pushing for it, you're pushing for it. That's the one that could make sense. Let's take a trip into the headlines. There's a couple interesting nuggets floating around from the world of boxing. July 3rd, legendary boxer Oscar De La Hoya, who runs Golden Boy Promotions, will be returning to the ring, and he will be competing on the Tiller card July 3rd. And it's also looking like at some point this summer, UFC legend, former middleweight champion, Anderson the Spider Silva, will have his foray into the world of boxing. Into some UFC news now. April 17th, a bantamweight fight has been added to the UFC Fight Night. It's going to see Tony Gravely against Anthony Burchak. April 24th, UFC 261 welterweight bout officially added to that card. Alex Oliveira versus Randy Brown. June 5th, at welterweight, you're going to see, moving up from 155 pounds, Francisco Trinaldo against Muslim Sakaev. Coming out of retirement to fight on July 17th will be former women's bantamweight champion Miesha Tate, and she's going to be taking on Marion Renault. The UFC has made some news with some cuts. They've released Jordan Espinosa, Brock Weaver, Shanna Dobson, and Vincent Quinchero. The promotion has also announced now the signing of former Cage Warriors champion Paddy Pimblett, who is 16-3, 12 finishes, 7 by way of submission, coming off of a rear naked choke victory. He called for this shot. He's getting it. Now backtrack to July 10th, because the UFC has announced UFC 264 for that date. Could be the return of International Fight Week, and it's expected that that will be the date for the trilogy. McGregor-Poirier 3. That fight is speculated. Contracts are still to be signed. Fights official for that card, though, include at middleweight, Omari Akhmedov versus Brad Tavares. At flyweight, Jerome Rivera, Santa Fe's own, against Zuglas Zumamogov. And at featherweight, Ryan Hall against Ilir Topuria. That's all for the UFC news. We move over to Bellator. Bellator making just a plethora of announcements for Bellator 258, including at lightweight, former LFA champion Bryce Logan is going to be taking on Alan Omar. You're going to see at middleweight, Johnny Embiid versus Daniel Madrid. At featherweight, Weber Almeida versus Johnny Soto. At bantamweight, Henry Corrales, who was in the World Grand Prix for featherweight, against Keith Lee. And the card is also expected to see, but not official for the card, Peter Quinali versus Patrick Freire. In a little bit of LFA news, LFA will once again be back in Shawnee, Oklahoma for LFA 104. That main event will see 9-2-1 Aaron McKenzie against 8-3 Brandon Phillips. It's a battle for the Sooner State. It's also, got to mention real quick in the news, Bellator MMA has officially released their first set of rankings covering the champions and the top 10 of every one of their weight classes. We'll have more on that in just a minute. This week's action will start off with UFC Fight Pass, and we're starting off on Thursday. We have a Cage Fury FC doubleheader. Thursday, it's CFFC 94 welterweight title main event. Basil Hafs versus Evan Cutts. That is preceded by Roy Jones Jr. boxing. So you got MMA and boxing Thursday night. Friday, it's CFFC 95 lightweight title main event. Zolk Aryan Ainav Kamchibakov, one of the hardest names I've ever tried to say, versus Jesse Smith. That's a world title fight. And then that's preceded by Icon 6, featuring UFC vet recently released Brock Weaver, former CES champion who was part of the PFL and was also on Dana White's Contender Series, Chris Curtis, and unbeaten prospect Elvin Espinosa. So that's what you get on Friday on UFC Fight Pass. Friday, it's Showtime. Bellator's long-awaited debut, Scott Coker's return to Showtime. It's Bellator 255, featherweight title, featherweight Grand Prix semifinal main event. Patricio Pitbull Freire, 31-4 versus Emmanuel El Matador Sanchez, the number 2 ranked contender in the Bellator rankings at 20-4. This is a rematch from November of 2018. Pitbull came out victorious. After the fight went to the judges' scorecards. Speaking of the champion, Pitbull, 6-fight win streak, 22 finishes in his career. Of those 31 victories, we're talking about 11 submissions, 11 by knockout. Sanchez, the challenger, comes in a 3-fight win streak. 2 of those wins, great decisions over well-known veterans Daniel Weichel and Georgi Katahanian. If you're wondering what kind of finisher Sanchez is, it's 8 submissions, 1 knockout for the Rufus Sport trained athlete. The co-main event, a lot of us hardcores, I get giddy, I'm excited. You have to be ready for this one. If you're a hardcore, you already know what I'm talking about. I don't even got to say the name because it's 2 mega names from the MMA world put together. It's the Bellator debut of Usman Nurmagomedov, 11-0 prospect, taking on 7-4 Mike Hamill, a Bellator and LFA vet, a finisher. Usman, also a finisher, 10 finishes, 7 knockouts, 3 submissions, 7 finishes in the first round. That main card, it is star-studded for the Bellator debut on Showtime. Again, a top 10 welterweight matchup. I told you those rankings, we'd have more on them. They're coming into play. It's number 3 Neiman Gracie, 10-1, taking on the 13-4, number 6 ranked Jason Jackson, an ass-kicking machine. That is his nickname. Women's flyweight action, number 4 ranked Alejandra Lara, 9-3, taking on number 5 unbeaten from Japan, Kana Watanabe. Well-rounded, 3 knockouts, 3 decisions and 3 submissions. I think she's going to look to get this one to the ground against Laura, who primarily likes to keep her fight standing and would rather be striking. And then opening up that main card, it's a heavyweight matchup. Replacing Matt Mitrione, it's the 11-7 Jack May. He's going to have a big opportunity to get into the rankings as he take on the number 6 ranked Terrell Fortune, who comes in at 9-1. An outstanding collegiate wrestling career from Fortune. May, a kickboxer, striker versus grappler. That's what MMA was based off. Now you want to talk about the prelims. Those start early. Oh, and that main card, 9 p.m. Eastern. Prelims. That's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern on the Bellator YouTube page. And I mean, there's some incredible international talent on the card. Not to mention a couple of prospects that you must be aware of. Chris Gonzalez, 5-0. And he's going to be taking on the veteran. The man has been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. 37 career MMA fights. Roger Mortha going to be taking on a top prospect in Chris Gonzalez. You also have the highly anticipated debut of Magomedov. Magomedov is 17-1, a former ACB champion who holds a win and is 1-1 against Peter Yan, the former UFC champion. Magomedov, 11 finishes, 7 by submission. On short notice, he's taking on J.C. Hamilton, 15-7. A big show vet, been in the LFA, the RFA, the Contender Series. Coming in short notice, normally fights at flyweight, but does have an incredible wrestling pedigree. You also have what I think could be the fight to steal all the attention from the undercard. You have at middleweight, he's 17-1, Fabio Aguiar, who's on a 9-fight win streak, 15 finishes, taking on Khalid Mortazayev, 14-2, 13 knockouts. Also, you have the debut for Bellator of Makhmed Bermakov, 14-1, 10 finishes, 8 by way of submission. It's a big opportunity for Bellator. There is no UFC this weekend. It's Showtime on Showtime. It's been highly anticipated. Let's see what Bellator can do with the night. Saturday night, not a lot going on. You're still a fight fan. It's time to talk some boxing. We have ESPN Plus hosting a WBO 4-pack of title fights from Caesars Palace in Dubai. And the main event, 22-2 Jamal Herring versus 28-2 Carl Frampton. WBO super featherweight title fight. And that's on ESPN Plus. So there's MMA and boxing Thursday. You got a ton of MMA Friday. And there's some great boxing on Saturday. Be sure you go to cageminds.com. Check out all the results, all the news going on in the MMA world. As I said, check out the podcast, Micah Frankel's Cage Minds. You can also keep up with us on social media. Cage Minds Combat Sports News on Facebook. At Cage Minds on Twitter. Cage Minds _CSN on Instagram. And always, please, like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate the support and appreciate you watching.